Responsible tourism is the concept of visiting a place as a tourist and trying to make only a positive impact on the environment, society and economy. Tourism can involve primary transportation to the general location, local transportation, accommodations, entertainment, recreation, nourishment and shopping. It can be related to travel for leisure, business and what is called VFR. There is now broad consensus that tourism development should be sustainable. However, the question of how to achieve this remains an object of debate. Without travel there is no tourism, so the concept of sustainable tourism is tightly linked to a concept of sustainable mobility. Two relevant considerations are tourism's reliance on fossil fuels and tourism's effect on climate change. 72% of tourism's CO2 come from transportation, 24% from accommodations, and 4% from local activities. Aviation accounts for 55% of those transportation CO2 emissions. However, when considering the impact of all greenhouse gas emissions from tourism and that aviation emissions are made at high altitude where their effect on climate is amplified, aviation alone accounts for 75% of tourism's climate impact. The International Air Transport Association considers an annual increase in aviation fuel efficiency of 2% per year through 2050 to be realistic. However, both Airbus and Boeing expect the passenger kilometers of air transport to increase by about 5% yearly through at least 2020, overwhelming any efficiency gains by 2050, with other economic sectors having greatly reduced the CO2 emissions. Tourism is likely to be generating 40% of global carbon emissions. The main cause is an increase in the average distance traveled by tourists, which for many years has been increasing at a faster rate than the number of trips taken. Sustainable transportation is now established as the critical issue confronting a global tourism industry that is palpably unsustainable, and aviation lies at the heart of this issue. Social and economic aspects. Global economists forecast continuing international tourism growth, the amount depending on the location, as one of the world's largest and fastest growing industries. This continuous growth will place great stress on remaining biologically diverse habitats and indigenous cultures, which are often used to support mass tourism. Tourists who promote sustainable tourism are sensitive to these dangers and seek to protect tourist destinations, and to protect tourism as an industry. Sustainable tourists can reduce the impact of tourism in many ways, informing themselves of the culture, politics, and economy of the communities visited, anticipating and respecting local cultures, expectations and assumptions, supporting the integrity of local cultures by favoring businesses which conserve cultural heritage and traditional values, supporting local economies by purchasing local goods and participating with small, local businesses, conserving resources by seeking out businesses that are environmentally conscious, and by using the least possible amount of non-renewable resources. Increasingly, destinations and tourism operations are endorsing and following responsible tourism as a pathway towards sustainable tourism. Responsible tourism and sustainable tourism have an identical goal, that of sustainable development. The pillars of responsible tourism are therefore the same as those of sustainable tourism: environmental integrity, social justice and economic development. The major difference between the two is that, in responsible tourism, individuals, organizations and businesses are asked to take responsibility for their actions and the impacts of their actions. This shift in emphasis has taken place because some stakeholders feel that insufficient progress towards realizing sustainable tourism has been made. Since the Earth Summit in Rio, This is partly because everyone has been expecting others to behave in a sustainable manner. The emphasis on responsibility in responsible tourism means that everyone involved in tourism, government, product owners and operators, transport operators, community services, NGOs and community-based organization, tourists, local communities, industry associations, are responsible for achieving the goals of responsible tourism. Stakeholders of sustainable tourism play a role in continuing this form of tourism. This can include organizations as well as individuals. To be specific, ECOFIN. A stakeholder in the tourism industry is deemed to be anyone who is impacted on by development positively and negatively, and as a result it reduces potential conflict between the tourists and host community by involving the latter in shaping the way in which tourism develops. The Global Sustainable Tourism Council serves as the international body for fostering increased knowledge and understanding of sustainable tourism practices, promoting the adoption of universal sustainable tourism principles and building demand for sustainable travel. It has a number of programs including the setting of international standards for accreditation agencies, governments. The values and ulterior motives of governments often need to be taken into account when assessing the motives for sustainable tourism. One important factor to consider in any ecologically sensitive or remote area or an area new to tourism is that of carrying capacity. This is the capacity of tourists or visitors an area can sustainably tolerate without damaging the environment or culture of the surrounding area. This can be altered and revised in time and with changing perceptions and values. For example, originally the sustainable carrying capacity of the Galapagos Islands was set at 12,000 visitors per annum but was later changed by the Ecuadorian government to 50,000 for economic reasons and objectives. Non-governmental organizations. Non-governmental organizations are one of the stakeholders in advocating sustainable tourism. The roles can range from spearheading sustainable tourism practices to simply doing research. University research teams and scientists can be tapped to aid in the process of planning. Such solicitation of research can be observed in the planning of Cat Ba National Park in Vietnam. Dive resort operators in Bunaken National Park, Indonesia, play a crucial role by developing exclusive zones for diving and fishing respectively, such that both tourists and locals can benefit from the venture. Large conventions, meetings and other major organized events drive the travel, tourism and hospitality industry. Cities and convention centers compete to attract such commerce which has heavy impacts on resource use and the environment. Major sporting events, such as the Olympic Games, present special problems regarding environmental burdens and degradation, but burdens imposed by the regular convention industry can be vastly more significant. Green conventions and events are a new but growing sector and marketing point within the convention and hospitality industry. More environmentally aware organizations, corporations and government agencies are now seeking more sustainable event practices, greener hotels, restaurants and convention venues, and more energy-efficient or climate-neutral travel and ground transportation. However, the convention trip not taken can be the most sustainable option, with most international conferences having hundreds if not thousands of participants, and the bulk of these usually traveling by plane. Conference travel is an area where significant reductions in air travel-related GHG emissions could be made. This does not mean non-attendance, since modern internet communications are now ubiquitous and remote audio-visual participation, For example, by 2003 Access Grid technology had already successfully hosted several international conferences. A particular example is the large American Geophysical Union's annual meeting, which has used live streaming several years. This provides live streams and recordings of keynotes, named lectures and oral sessions, and provides opportunities to submit questions and interact with authors and peers. Following the live stream, the recording of each session is posted online within 24 hours. Some convention centers have begun to take direct action in reducing the impact of the conventions they host. One example is the Moscone Center in San Francisco, which has a very aggressive recycling program, a large solar power system, and other programs aimed at reducing impact and increasing efficiency. Local communities. Local communities benefit from sustainable tourism through economic development, job creation, and infrastructure development. Tourism revenues bring economic growth and prosperity to attractive tourist destinations, which can raise the standard of living in destination communities. Sustainable tourism operators commit themselves to creating jobs for local community members. Increase in tourism revenue to an area acts as a driver for the development of increased infrastructure. As tourist demands increase in a destination, a more robust infrastructure is needed to support the needs of both the tourism industry and the local community.